Hello again. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. We're really excited to have you join us for this webinar, The Reality of Shifting Power to Local Actors, case study on child protection initiatives in Nigeria, Kenya, and Malawi. My name is Audrey Utley, and I am the International Federation of the Red Cross Coordinator for Child Protection in Emergencies. This event is hosted jointly by the Care and Protection of Children Learning Network, housed at Columbia University, the Child Protection Area of Responsibility, and the IFRC. Today, we'll be hearing from our wonderful colleagues who will discuss their experiences implementing initiatives which aim to shift leadership, resources, and decision-making power in child protection into local hands. Specifically, we'll describe 3 countries' approaches to localization of child protection, common challenges, promising strategies, and key recommendations moving forward. Just a note, when we say local actors this afternoon, we're referring primarily to national and civil society organizations. We know that there are many structural and logistical obstacles when it comes to making child protection community-based and centered on local voices. However, from these 3 case studies, we have seen that there are also many shared lessons and best practices. Progress has been made in the past 5 years to advance the localization agenda, and we hope this webinar will support existing efforts in propelling this work forward. We will begin by giving you some background on the CPOR's localization work. Then we will dive into a short presentation, briefly covering key findings from the 3 case studies. And following the presentation, we will invite our 5 panelists to share their perspective and insights regarding the core challenges and lessons learned across the countries. Finally, we will open up the discussion and take questions from the audience. So please feel free to send in your questions at any time throughout. I think there is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And also feel free to introduce yourselves, send comments through the chat box as well. Just make this webinar yours. We're happy to exchange and coordinate contacts and follow up afterwards. We really look forward to a fruitful event with you. So to get started, I would like to introduce you to Joyce Mutiso, who will give some opening remarks and offers a background on the CPOR's work on localizing child protection and humanitarian action. Joyce is a Global Child Protection Area of Responsibility Deputy Coordinator on Partnerships and Advocacy. She has extensive experience in child protection programming and coordination, spanning more than a decade across East Africa, West Africa, and South Asia. She was also instrumental in translating global aspirations into operational reality, leading to cutting-edge developments at the interagency level, including on localization. Over to you, Joyce.
Thank you so much, Audrey. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. We are very excited at the Global Child Protection Area of Responsibility to be part of this webinar. And we want to say a huge thanks to the CPC, Columbia University, and the IFRC for making this possible. And thank you everyone for joining us today. As you may already know, national and local actors make up a majority of the membership of child protection actors at country level, around 60%, including in child protection coordination groups. In light of this membership and recognition of this membership of local and national actors, in 2020, the Global Child Protection Area of Responsibility conducted an assessment to examine the extent to which the global CPOR's approaches and initiatives on localization since the launch of the Grand Bargain have helped to advance the localization agenda. So this was a reflection of the approaches and initiatives that the CPOR had taken on this front. Whilst this assessment report highlighted our achievements, it also highlighted challenges and gaps in advancing the localization agenda. It also outlined recommendations, particularly on improving governance and decision-making, influence and participation, partnerships, funding, and institutional capacities. Our partnership with the CPC Colombia over the last 3 years has focused on these key areas from the recommendations, with emphasis on research and capacity strengthening. We are therefore pleased to have collaborated also with the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies at the global level on this specific piece of work that brings us to the webinar today. This webinar allows us to learn from the case studies from Kenya, Malawi, and Nigeria on the experiences of national and local actors engaged with international humanitarian response, including with child protection mechanisms across Kenya, Malawi, and Nigeria. The case studies emphasize that shifting power to national and local actors requires deliberate and resourced efforts that are responsive to the needs of national and local actors. This is important not just for technical capacities, but also for institutional capacities, including governance. Simply put, if we want to increase our coverage and reach more children with quality child protection services, we need to address the obstacles that impede national and local actors in meaningfully contributing to the prevention and response to abuse, exploitation, and neglect against violence, against children in humanitarian action. We hope that the learnings from these case studies and this webinar today will inspire all of us, particularly the international actors, in shifting more power to national and local actors and to hold ourselves accountable to the grand bargain. Thank you, and we hope that you will find this webinar today of inspiration and of learning. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joyce, for those opening remarks and for giving us some background on the CPOR's localization initiative. So the case studies that we will discuss today aim to assess the CPOR's efforts to enact the localization agenda and document country examples of coordination groups transitioning power to government and civil society leaderships. To maybe have an idea of your constitution, we would like to invite you to enter a short poll. I think this will give us a snapshot of the audience today. So a poll should be appearing on your screen shortly. I see it on my end. I hope it's the case for you too. So please choose the type of role or organization that best describes you. So I hope everyone was able to access the poll, and I will be sharing the results shortly. Okay, it's interesting. I think we have a big majority, 56% of you joining us from international non-governmental NGOs. And then it's very spread between NGOs, academia, and interagency or multilateral organizations. So it's great to see the the diversity of profiles, and I think it's good to keep in mind when we see the questions later on. Thank you. So we also know that many of you, depending on your organization or agencies, you've been enacting your own localization initiatives. So we would like to post a second poll it would be a sort of trying to gauge the how effective you feel that localization initiatives in your context have been. So there should be a second poll coming up. And if you are not aware or not involved in this kind of initiatives, feel free to select the not sure option or not applicable. So I think the questions should be posted now. Okay, so the results are coming in now, and it seems that also just about a majority, 49% of you think that the effectiveness of localization strategies in your region was somewhat effective. So we see it's kind of in between, with only 8% considering it effective and 15% not effective. Just to keep in mind, I think a good quarter of the audience is also not so sure about it or doesn't know whether it's applicable. So I think it's interesting, and we have a mix of opinions, so it's gonna give us some also some ideas about the discussion we'll have later on. Thank you. So I think now we would like to share the objectives of the webinar. We'll start with a presentation of the case studies, and it should be coming up on the screen. So we will have 3 key objectives. Number 1 will be about displaying the overall initiative by sharing background information on what was conducted in Nigeria, Kenya, and Malawi to increase engagement of national and civil society organizations in child protection and humanitarian action coordination systems. Then we will share some overlapping findings across the 3 contexts, and finally have a candid discussion about the reality of shifting power to local child protection actors, the challenges, some promising practices, and of course, the lessons learned. To get us started, I think I would like to hand over to Aye Khalil, our graduate student who's been helping a lot with the case studies. Over to you, Aye.
Thank you, Audrey, and hello, everyone. To start, I just wanted to give a brief background on the country context for each of the case studies that we conducted. The first case study conducted was in Nigeria, and we were taking a look at the Nigerian National Non-Governmental Organization Consortium. The consortium was first established in February of 2019 and then actually relaunched in July of 2020 during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's a local initiative with a mission to support Nigerian organizations, and its goals are to promote localization, ensure that the Grand Bargain is implemented across northeastern Nigeria, engage in institutional capacity building of Nigerian NGOs, and connect with a broader donor community to access funds for local Nigerian NGOs. The consortium is entirely self-funded and its meetings are facilitated internally, and its model in Nigeria served as a great opportunity for national organizations to come together with a strong and collective voice. The consortium members felt that a platform for national NGOs to come together is critical to the successful implementation of child protection services in emergencies. The next two case studies that we conducted assessed the utility of national action plans that had the purpose of strengthening coordination of child protection provisions in emergencies at the national and country levels. Prior to the creation of these action plans, a series of trainings were conducted that aimed to strengthen leadership and collaboration of national actors and enhance national government's institutional capacity for coordination of child protection response in humanitarian settings. This was a joint initiative launched by the CPAOR, the Partnership to End Violence Against Children, and the International Federation of the Red Cross. The first action plan implementation that was looked at was in Kenya. So for some context on Kenya on this slide, most emergencies in Kenya are climate related, with the government retaining the primary role in the coordination and implementation of humanitarian action. Kenya uses a sectoral approach with various sectors such as water, sanitation and hygiene, health, education, and agriculture, where the government really takes the lead. And working parallel to that structure, UN agencies manage the interagency coordination. After the 2018 trainings I mentioned and subsequent implementation of the action plan in Kenya, government authorities established the Department of Children's Services within the national government. And the government built local capacity through increasing awareness of child protection and humanitarian action, building the capacity of volunteers, and creating dedicated coordination bodies. The second implementation of an action plan after the 2018 trainings was in Malawi. In Malawi, the protection cluster is led by the Ministry of Gender and co-led by a focal person from UNICEF. And the action plan there has been implemented via the cluster system and has been integrated into existing emergency response plans that are spearheaded by the Department of Disaster Management Affairs, which is called Dodoma. Emergencies in Malawi are environmental and often reoccurring in nature. And when emergencies arise, action plans are submitted to Dodoma, and they subsequently coordinate a response to that emergency. The protection cluster in Malawi was particularly active during the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic, and this was due to increases in child protection-related issues, such as a large increase in child marriages. The protection cluster created specified COVID-19 response plans with goals to reduce protection threats for affected populations, protect vulnerable groups from violence, exploitation, abuse, and neglect, and also to ensure that basic human rights remained respected during the height of the pandemic. The action plan implementation in Malawi increased coordination of child protection issues, advocacy for protection-related issues, and strengthened protection mechanisms at the national level. Now, across all three case studies, there were a number of common findings. As we know, trust is a central tenet to building and maintaining relations with local actors. However, it was found that across all three contexts, there is mistrust in the capacity of national organizations to manage funds and ensure safeguarding. It was also found that there are major obstacles in the way of national organizations accessing funding. And this is because direct funding remains largely in the hands of few international organizations and UN agencies. And when funds are available, they are rarely dedicated for strengthening the operational capacity of national organizations. Fund allocation to operational capacity strengthening is really important because national organizations are often not seen as able to pass the due diligence test, which is a checklist that designates NGOs as good and reliable partners. Additionally, it was found that national and civil society organizations hold few leadership and decision-making roles at the national and regional level, and this causes concern over national actors' ability to have a voice in meaningful decision-making. And lastly, integration of child protection activities across sectors was found to not always be prioritized and therefore not well integrated into some contexts humanitarian response systems. So given the similar overarching results of the case studies, there are a number of overarching recommendations that arose from them as well. First, the international community should be mindful of stereotypes and avoid generalizations when speaking about the capacity of national organizations. It is very important that the correct tone is set when working with local actors on the ground. It is also recommended that larger amounts of funds are earmarked for national and civil society organizations with specific funds allocated for operational and organizational capacity strengthening when the need arises. It's also recommended that the international community encourage the integration of community perspectives on child protection into higher level decision-making. This should be done by ensuring that national and civil society organizations have a seat at the decision-making table and accountability mechanisms are established that really make that a reality. Lastly, it is recommended that the international community examine the power dynamics at play when government and international NGOs partner with national and civil society organizations to implement their programming. It's important that national actors are able to act independently and due considerations really given to their perspectives. Now, those are general overarching findings that provide the context for the discussion section of this webinar. And during this forthcoming discussion, representatives from Nigeria, Kenya, and Malawi will dive into more specific findings related to their context. Now, I would like to hand it over to my colleague, Pilar Bankalari, who will introduce our panelists for today's discussion.
Thank you, Aya. So now that we have given you some background on these initiatives, the major findings across all three countries, we'd like to invite our panelists to discuss their experiences, the obstacles they've faced, whether in funding, capacity strengthening, or fostering equitable partnerships, as well as the strategies that they've used to overcome these challenges. So first, let me briefly present our panelists. Their full bios will be sent in the chat. So first, Abba Yusuf is the Executive Director of the Grow Strong Foundation in Nigeria. Edem is a founder of Green Code and head of Green Code Mentoring Hub, also in Nigeria. Miriam Kalua is the Protection Cluster Coordinator at UNICEF Malawi. And lastly, Martin Nakuna is a Child Protection Officer also at UNICEF Malawi. Thank you all so much for being here today. We're so excited to have you all sharing with us. So let's dive right in. So to start the conversation, we'd first like to discuss how national organizations can be meaningfully engaged as partners and leaders in child protection coordination. We know that members of national and civil society organizations bring a wealth of experience and expertise related to child protection. Yet coordination mechanisms, policies, and guidelines often trickle down from UN and international actors and national authorities. So keeping this in mind, my first question is, what might it look like for child protection in humanitarian action policies to center local voices, or rather voices from national and civil society organizations? So I'd like to invite Yusuf to start with this question. Yusuf, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Pilar, for that. And good morning, everybody, and good afternoon. Like earlier clearly mentioned, I work here in Northeast Nigeria. Yeah, my response to this question will be very brief, as well as giving an experience on what we are currently implementing in Nigeria, in particular in Northeast Nigeria. Yeah, in terms of coordination mechanism, currently I'm happy to inform you, like in the Northeast Nigeria, the national actor is the co-lead of that sector. Many thanks to Stray Child and UNICEF and CPOR for giving us the needed capacity to ensure that the national NGO is able to lead that co-lead leadership in coordination of the child protection material action intervention here in Northeast Nigeria. And also just to inform you, GSF has been supporting the coordination role for the first 19 months so far, and we have successfully achieved so many things, even in the absence of the international partners that are coming outside the country. So yeah, keeping in mind that child protection material actions for our voices to be really heard. Basically, the best experience I can share here is to like ensure that national actors can come together once to really understand the context of what they are being intervening in that particular context or country of their intervention. And another thing we may look for is like asking ourselves the attitude we may purchase, that is the internal capacity of running of that organization. What is your mission in general, and what do you intend to achieve? Does it relate to the child protection, or it relates to the general humanitarian response, or whatever you have as a vision? Ensure that it is practically implemented within your organization. And with this, I'm very sure the international partners as well as the donors community will hear our voice and respond to our needed whatever we need to ensure. A simple case studies is the what happened before we were being selected to lead the core leadership structure here in Northeast Nigeria, because we displayed some level of capacity. In general, I may tell you both the technical capacity as well as the local context knowledge, and that is why GSA was given to lead those coordinations. So in general, yeah, our voices can be heard. Yeah, if we are really having a good structure put in place, and we have a collective voice and we understand the context, now we intervene and we can still learn from the international community, where we also maintain this statement that says we should implement as international as possible, as local as possible, and international where it is necessary. So, and this will really ensure that our system can be strengthened and strong if we work hand in hand with the international communities. So lastly, the point I would like to also voice out in terms of the for our collective voice to be heard, this issue of information sharing among these CBOs. How do we ensure that CBOs or the national actors have a platform where information are being shared in terms of opportunities or other capacity or whatever response we may plan that we may have, and to be implemented by all. Thank you, Pilar. I will stop at here, and I'm happy to respond to whatever question may arise. Over to you.
Thank you, Yusuf. Thank you for speaking to the importance of understanding context of having that equitable partnership and that two-way exchange between international actors and national organizations. Martin, I'd be interested now to hear from you from the UNICEF Malawi perspective. Do you have anything to add to what Yusuf said, or anything to contribute from your side?
Yes, thank you, and good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Martin Nkuna, as was indicated, Child Protection Officer in UNICEF Malawi. It is indeed clear that local actors bring a wealth of experience to in as far as responding to emergencies is concerned. And it is important that their views and experiences are taken into account. For instance, in Malawi at the moment, we are responding to a mild tropical storm, Anna, that affected the country around January 22 this year. And the actors from the national level were able to start an assessment 3 days after that. But it was very clear that when we reached there, local actors had already mobilized communities, organized themselves, collected a lot of the data that we came down here to collect. So very clear that local actors, local organizations, and local structures should be at the center of response to emergencies. Even when we bring down supplies, they are able to tell us that this item is not fit for purpose, which shows that maybe sometimes we don't engage more of the local actors. But it is very important that their knowledge and wealth of expertise is taken into account. In our case, Malawi, for instance, as a country, we are implementing a decentralization process. So we have a lot of systems from the grassroots up to the national level. And a lot of development work is designed at community level using the local structure. So it's something that we would want to use more, so that the voices of the local actors and the communities themselves are taken into account. For example, in emergency response, from the district level, we have the district civil protection committees. It goes down to the area civil protection committees and the village civil protection committees. So most of the emergency programming, including we consult these committees to provide their needs and so on and suggestion. But what I've seen as a challenge comes in due to delays in planning, resulting in overlooking the available local actors. So if you don't plan well, an emergency comes and you rush to do assessments to get the information requires, and forget that the VCPs, the village structures or the district structures and the local organizations, we need to sit down with them to plan together to determine what the needs of the affected populations are. The other issue that I've seen is a challenge in funding, that we most of the local actors and organizations don't have adequate resources to engage fully. They need to travel, they need to come to the district, but with limited funding, then their views are not maybe are not taken into consideration. Of course, there is also the issue of capacity. We need to build the capacities of these local actors to adequately represent the community voices, and creating good environment for them to contribute. But yes, I agree, the need to engage more the local actors and the deficiencies that we have sometimes, overlooking the resources that are there at the local level. Let me stop there for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. And thank you for speaking a little bit, not only to the robust kind of infrastructure that supports engagement of local actors, but also to some of the challenges, such as those you mentioned, like delays in planning when an emergency strikes, and kind of what kind of structures can support preparation and planning so that those local actors who are the first ones responding on the ground, as you mentioned during the tropical storm, so that they have kind of a seat at the table. Thank you. And I'm wondering, does Edem or Miriam, do you have any response or anything to add with respect to kind of the structures or platforms that might support this kind of two-way exchange between national and international actors?
Okay, let me just share my own little experience in addition to what Abba Yusuf just shared. Precisely in the Northeast Nigeria, there are a lot of incorporation, networking, and partnership with local NGOs regarding child protection. A case in point is that some of the international NGO are taking on board some national NGOs in the implementation of child protection humanitarian interventions. One of them is Street Child, Save the Children, Plan International, etc. And again, with the agreement and the TOR that was developed for a national NGO to be part of the co-lead for the child protection subsector. It also, which Grow Strong Foundation is also giving a staff to support that. It's also a boost for the national NGO, and it goes a long way to show how in real terms or in practical terms, how localization has begun to take shape. So that is a very welcome recommendation. But again, outside that, we also have Child Protection Network, which seems to be like a civil society, is a national civil society network for other NGOs working on child protection that might not necessarily be in the humanitarian intervention. And this network exists in all the states in Nigeria as well. Then again, UNICEF too, on its own part, apart from being a UN agency, is also working with some national NGOs in the implementation of some child protection projects also in Nigeria, specifically in the Northeast. So we also believe that if more, or if there's this strategic effort by the UN and the international NGO to drive this consciously, year in, year out, then we will have this power shift from the international to the national in the area of CP. And again, there are a lot of other national NGOs coming up and indicating interest to be a player in the child protection sector. So, and they need a lot of capacity development and capacity strengthening in order for them to function well. So that's my little contribution to this. Over.
Thank you, Edem. Thank you for that. And we will talk more in the latter part of the discussion about kind of what role international players have in kind of shifting the power and creating more of a partnership. I'll open it up just once more before we move on. Miriam or Yusuf or Martin, any final thoughts on this topic?
Yes, good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Just to concur with Yusuf, I think on the contribution made that the local actors also need their own platform. But much as they need their own platform, there's also need to link that platform to the international community as well, so that there would be bilateral engagements between the two. It would not make sense for them just to have their own conversations and discussions and then they make own recommendations without engaging with partners whom they think in quotes may have the capacity and may have the resources. So that bilateral engagement between these two platforms where agreements are made and then recommendations are made on how power to the local actors can also be given. I think that's my contribution towards Yusuf's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. Thank you for emphasizing kind of the two-way nature of the exchange and creating these platforms for kind of open dialogue and sharing of best practices. So with that, I think to move the conversation kind of forward, we'd like to invite our panelists to share more about kind of some of these promising practices that they've been a part of in each of their respective countries. So more formally, I'd like to ask if there are any insights or promising strategies related to shifting power to national or civil society organizations in your context that you intend to move forward. And for this question, Edem, I'd like to invite you to kind of share your perspective from Nigeria.
Yeah, thank you very much. I can say that there are conscious effort to do this, because you know that sitting on the table is one thing, and then making contribution or being recognized to sit on the table is one thing, okay? And that is the starting point for the subsector, the CP subsector, to recognize the value that the national NGO can add, and then created that seat for a co-lead to come from the national NGO, which, like I and Abba Yusuf had earlier confirmed, that seat is being occupied by staff from GSF, is a very strategic attempt and strategy to make sure that there's this power shift. Because again, there will be some form of lesson learned, coaching by the lead supporting the co-lead to also know, because if, for instance, just like what has just happened in the nutrition subsector now, the lead ended his mission in Nigeria and currently is on vacation, and then maybe to resume in a different mission outside Nigeria. So now the co-lead, who is a national NGO, automatically resumed that position and is running. And that is the same thing that will happen too in Nigeria if such opportunity happens, because this other national NGO staff has been trained, has been mentored by the lead, and then can function very well in that direction. Then again, that is at that level. Then again, we also have a fund called Nigerian Humanitarian Fund, and there have been an attempt by the fund management to ensure that there was a particular pilot grant that was set by the fund to ensure that they call it consortium fund, where an international NGO must go into consortium with at least 2 national partners. And that is another conscious effort and strategy to ensure that this national NGOs mentors the other national NGOs for them to function and also learn the rope, and then strategically implement the CP activities. So these are some of the strategies I have seen within Nigeria and within the Northeast zone where we are all working. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Edem. I think it's very powerful what you said about having a seat at the at the decision-making table is really just a starting point. And I appreciate you spoke about capacity strengthening and kind of also we've talked about funds and how these all tie together. Martin, do you mind kind of bouncing off of that and sharing some examples from the UNICEF Malawi side, please?
Thank you. From UNICEF Malawi's side, I think I've talked about these strategies in my area contribution, but as a protection cluster, responding to the current emergencies that we have, both COVID-19, the lean season, and now the flooding that has affected the southern part of Malawi. Our strategy more is to decentralize cluster activities at district level, because it is at district level that you have many of the local actors participating, many of the local organizations, the community-based organizations, and the structures that I talked about, the District Civil Protection Committee, the Area Civil Protection Committee, the Village Civil Protection Committees. But to make this happen, there's need to also simplify the funding processes, procedures that that we have, but also make deliberate effort to work with the community based organizations so that they engage more with the communities and the people that are affected. So strengthening of protection cluster at district level is one of our key strategies that we are using at the moment. My colleague, maybe Miriam, can add on to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Miriam, would you like to add to what Martin has said?
Yeah, thank you very much. Martin has talked a lot about capacitating the decentralized structures and community-based organizations. And I think one of the strategies under capacity strengthening, I think we are all aware that mostly the local actors may not have the technical capacity which is at par with the international NGO or a local NGO. So I think that's one of the areas where backstopping, I think the hands-on coaching is required as we work with the local actors to ensure that they also strengthen their technical capacities in planning, in reporting, and also in program implementation. They may have the experience, yes, but I think the rate at which the technical expectations are in terms of reporting or in terms of planning, I think that's where we normally have the challenges. So the issue of backstopping becomes quite key, requiring governments or requiring governments or NGOs or any other implementing partner to ensure that they also invest in having a dedicated officer who will walk through the partners at lower level in terms of the policies, the procedures that we have in terms of the standards in reporting or program implementation. So also that's one of the areas. And then secondly, even to give them direct sub-grants. I think that's also one of the ways to capacitate them. Normally, these organizations don't have funding to adequately achieve the results or the outcomes that may be needed. So the issue of also trusting them with more resources, not only just for a month or two, and then we expect them to come up with tangible outcomes. I think it doesn't work. Short-term programs normally don't work. Trust them with their medium to long-term programs, as long as there's technical backstopping, there's routine monitoring and support, they should also be able to grow with time. And then thirdly, I agree with Edem on the issue of conditionalities, ensuring that we also have conditionalities. Normally, big partners, I think the power comes in because of resources. So the donors that are giving out these resources may also attach conditions to ensure that local actors are also involved as part of program implementers. So that would be attached as a condition for any proposal that is going to be granted. They should also ensure that they have 1 or 2 local actors that they are working with. I also agree with Edem on the issue of representation at various platforms where decisions are made. For example, within the humanitarian response, we have the intercluster coordination groups. This is at higher level beyond the districts. So we have intercluster coordination, the humanitarian technical committee. This is where decisions are made at very, very highest level of authority. So it would be important also to have them represented at that level. And then thirdly, of course, we are not practicing this, but I would just make this as a recommendation to ensure that there are clear standards that are set to have local actors established. I think we notice sometimes they are established out of passion. So you find that one may not meet the required technical competence and capacity to run an organization, but at least is well-versed or has the passion to save. So if this could be said very well clearly in terms of if one is to establish a local organization X, these are the minimum requirements maybe for a manager, at least for a program officer, so that when they go into higher platforms, they should not be ashamed to voice out. They should not be ashamed, of course, maybe to share their thoughts or ideas, or even to lobby or to advocate for change in certain areas. Otherwise, the experience is there. But I think this technical and capacity gap is the one that normally betrays our local actors also to be at par with program officers that are at international level. I would stop here for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miriam. You've touched on so many of these kind of big points. You've summarized them, from this gap in technical capacity, but also this need for more trust, trusting local organizations with funds and trusting them with longer term projects to ensure kind of their sustainability, their growth, but also trust them with decision-making power. I'd love to hand it over to Yusuf to kind of comment on all of these points that Miriam beautifully brought up.
Yes, yeah, well, I think in addition to the comment made by Martin, Edem, and Miriam, basically I would love to add some few promising strategies that are currently in place, both globally and locally. Yeah, one of the strategy that GSF currently participating is about strengthening the capacity of local NGOs and ungoverned border region of like Chad region. This is a strategy that ISS, Institute of Security Studies, has been in place since 2018, where they give like an in-kind award grant for any promising organization on a yearly basis, about I think 10,000, just to support their communication system or communication strategy to be in place, plus the capacity training they give to build. Then another strategy that we have that is, though it's a global document, of which is the IAC guideline on strengthening the participation, representation, and leadership of local and national actors in humanitarian coordination mechanism. Yeah, this is one of the guidelines that was established, of which if it is something, if we can try as much as possible to localize it in our context, can also give a framework where local actors can take the lead as well as the power in terms of not just coordination and even intervention in humanitarian context. Then another promising strategy is the framework that was developed in conjunction with the CPOR and education cluster, where they developed a framework on institutional capacity strengthening, of which was recently launched, and it is a very good document if the NGOs, that is international community, as well as the national communities can come together, as well as the donors included, come together to implement those framework. And it is very practical. In fact, it captures almost everything that is the 5 areas of, in terms of partnership, institutional capacity, risk sharing, that is, or risk mitigation, among others. So it is a very promising strategy if we can implement such framework in our own context. And lastly, we are currently working in the Northeast on one of the promising strategy of trying to have a 5-year strategy plan in the child protection subsector. And one of the system we put in place is how localization can be improved, looking at the context of Northeast Nigeria, and which is one strategy that we are trying to implement for the next 5 years, if being approved. So yeah, these are the 5 documents, of which, sorry, the 4 documents I would like us to see that if we can try as much as possible to come across and then contextualize it in our own context. We don't need to be discussing about capacity funding, whatever, but let's try and adopt such document, and hopefully the power will be easily be given, not really shifted. Thank you. Over to you, Yana.
Thank you for those examples, Yusuf. And I was wondering, could you repeat the name of the document that you mentioned earlier so that we can share it with the participants?
Yeah. The first document is institution strengthening capacity of a local organization in ungoverned border region of Lake Chad, which was is a program that was introduced by Institute of Security Studies with support of AU, that is African Union. And then we have another one, the Interagency Standard Committee Guidelines on Strengthening Participation, Representation, and Leadership of Local and National Actors in Humanitarian Coordination Mechanism, that is IEC Humanitarian Coordination Mechanism. And then the other one is Framework on Strengthening the Institutional Capacity of Local NGO in Humanitarian Intervention, which was recently launched by the CPOR in conjunction with the Education Cluster. And the last is about to be launched, which is the Child Protection Subsector Strategy, 5-year strategy for Northeast Nigeria. And it is something we are currently working on. It captures this issue of localization, as well as how a national organization can take over. Yes, over to you.
Thank you, Yusuf, for listing those and for giving us kind of these concrete examples of resources and frameworks that are being used to shift the power and kind of empower local national organizations. So just, I think we'll move on to our final question now. So kind of to close this discussion, we'd like to turn our attention a little bit to the international community. So given some of the challenges identified in these case studies and that we've mentioned now throughout the discussion, I kind of want to pose this broader question, which is, how should the international community adjust its approach to localization in light of these challenges, these gaps, and kind of these structures? And I think I'd like to start with Miriam. Could you please give us some thoughts on how the international community can better support efforts to transfer power to national organizations?
Yeah, thanks very much, Pilar. Number one, I would say they should also consider funding local platforms. Normally, they also have challenges to meet because of inadequate resources, and they can't just coordinate. So a consideration to fund local platforms so that they are also able to voice out in terms of the priority issues and how best they can also be considered in program implementation in child protection, especially in humanitarian response. And then secondly, it would also be important to allow for more time for planning. I think this issue was raised by Martin earlier, that normally we have funding coming, but a proposal is being asked to be written in a week. So how do you consult the local level at that moment? But if that would be considered that for any change that is going to be meaningful, they should also be consulted at that level. So in addition to that, alongside that is the issue of accountability to the affected populations. Once they are also involved at that level, they would have a choice or chance to come back to them to account for the results that have been achieved in implementing programs. But normally our programs may not have such a space because of the short time frame in reporting, short time frame maybe in concluding projects. We normally have shorter projects. So we may not have enough time before you account for the results. You're already into proposal writing of another project. So maybe a completely different one. So the issue of accounting our results to the affected populations, the people we're working with in a collaboration with the local actors that we've been involving, that would also work. And then thirdly, I would just want to reemphasize the need to invest in technical backstopping. Would really want international community to have dedicated officers that would work hand in hand with the local actors to ensure that the capacity is strengthened, especially in the three key areas: issues of planning, issues of accounting for resources, as well as the issue of reporting. I think these are very key when it also comes to program implementation. So these key areas may also need dedicated officers who move around to ensure the local actors are well coordinated and they're also up to date in terms of the technical requirements for program implementation, especially in the three areas that I had mentioned. And then I would also maybe recommend, if possible, to simplify, I think, technicalities in terms of program implementation approaches. Sometimes we are too technical, and then the local actors may not match with our standards. For example, the cumbersome M&E tools, a full booklet of a case management tool, where one even gives up when they're filling in the data. So why don't we simplify? If we're looking for information of how many children are there, how many have disabilities, and how many are going to school, how many are married, what would we like to do, a simple tool that they would also use at that level. And then we make it more complicated, I think, at higher level. But at the moment, we use the complicated tool that we use in international NGOs. We would also like to cascade the use of the same at local level, and no wonder maybe we also have challenges to collect data and to analyze and interpret it. I think that's where sometimes we also have challenges. And then thirdly, lastly, I would still cling on to the issue of conditionalities. If we have international NGOs that have the capacity to subgrant, at least putting in conditions to ensure that they also involve the local actors in program implementation, that would automatically force any partner to ensure that they are engaged in the process, their capacity is strengthened, and over time, they are also reliable, even at that level, at the local level, to also implement the programs. And we are also ensured of sustainability of programs, because for some international NGOs, once they phase out, that is also the end of the program. So issues of sustainability may not be taken into account. So I think I may stop here for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam, for your candor and for all of those insights. I'd love to know from kind of the national organization perspective, either Yusuf or Edem, do you have anything to kind of contribute in terms of these requirements that Miriam mentioned, these standards that are put in place that sometimes are exclusionary?
Yes. Yeah, I think from my own end, I would really like to be very practical in terms of, we should just move away from issue of capacity building rather than mentorship intervention. yeah, mentorship in the sense of, I'll give you a very practical example of what happened to our own organization with regard to engaging a particular consultant to checkmate our system, and we reach out to that very person anytime we want to have a guidance on where to go to and how to do it. And in fact, one of the interesting things during this mentorship is like we completely revise our human resource policy as well as the financial manual, and which give us a very good breeding ground to an extent that we are one of the very new organizations that have access to humanitarian funding, that is the NHF funding due diligence, very easily due to that mentorship activities. And another strategy that we may put in place to overcome those challenges that mentioned in the in the research is like the issue of power difference or the competition between national and international non-governmental organizations. We shouldn't look at it as a competition, we rather look at it as partnership. Let's maintain those principles of partnership, and it should be open, not international, you are big, local, you are low. No, let us all be in the same page. Let's design the same program. Let's our policy speaks to one another, and then rather than just giving us to implement program, check our own system. Let's check your own system. Let's come to amicable ground where we both have maintained that principle of partnership in place. And then lastly, we really, the national NGO have to support it with unrestricted funding. Most of the funding are very restricted. There are no direct funding at all. It has to be opened. Yeah, we agree there are mistrust, but it's not everybody you can mistrust, or the capacity differs. Yeah, it's not everybody has a capacity. Even within the international organization, there is a mistrust, there is a capacity different, but yet only everything fall at the hand of the nationals, and that trust level or that power indifference or lack of understanding the principle of partnership should be addressed, and this will go a very long way. Thank you. These are the few contributions I will make. Over to you, Edem, if you have anything, or Hila.
Yeah, thank you, Yusuf, for this great insight. Actually, you have said a lot, but let me just add. Most of the excuses given by both the UN agencies and the international NGOs that tends to put the national NGO down or partially involved in things have always been anchored on capacity gaps. But I'm one of the person that also keep arguing this fact, because the international NGOs or the UN, apart from one or two foreign experts that they bring in from other countries into the country or into the Northeast region, all the works are done, including field activities that are actually yielding results, are carried out by the nationals that are locally recruited here. And the same locals are the ones working with the national NGOs. And then when they work with international NGOs, you don't hear issues around capacity gaps. But when it is time to hands off or shift power, or implement side by side with the national NGOs, you hear the UN agencies and the international NGOs talk about capacity gaps. So one will now ask, where are the capacity? Because some of these national NGOs, they pick up people, they recruit, their staff sometimes starts from the cadre of volunteers, and they grow from that cadre, from volunteers to full-time staff. And then when they are adverts by the UN agencies or the international NGOs, and they do well, and then they are taken. And when they take them, they will now forget that these people are coming from national NGOs, and they are actually delivering on their project goals and objectives. But when it is time to shift power and empower the national NGO, and then the NGOs are now talking about gaps, capacity gaps, or the local NGOs or the national NGOs does not have capacity gaps. But when you are recruiting staffs, you are recruiting staffs from these same national NGOs that you claim don't have capacity. So these are some of the things that seems to bring about the power imbalance, and which also tries to hinder the full actualization and the implementation of the localization agenda within the sector. It cuts across other sectors as well, not only on CP sector. So that is what I just have to add to or just to expatiate on the issues around capacity, which Yusuf have also mentioned. The rest Yusuf have already mentioned about the trust and around the funding, access to funding, because like you see access to funding, even when the Nigerian Humanitarian Fund, it seems to be more or less a pool fund for the for in-country, but you also see the UN agencies and international NGOs still competing for this same funding. So, and then at the end, the national NGOs will lose out. And then when you lose out and you don't have funding to practically implement some of these CP's activities, well, how will you expect that national NGOs first to build staff capacity and then also build their organizational capacity to also take over or handle some of these issues? So these are some of the issues that we really need to look into and then see ways that we can balance it, rather than playing double standards. Thank you. Over.
Thank you, Yusuf and Edem. I think it was great. You emphasized how kind of this lack of capacity is used to kind of maintain that power imbalance, both in terms of staffing and in access to funding. And I heard you, Yusuf, echo kind of this importance of moving away from capacity buildings. Let's stop talking about that. Let's talk about mentorship and these principles of kind of partnership at the same level, and how policies should kind of feed off of each other, right? Go both ways, and all parties should meet somewhere in the middle. So I'd like to open it up. Does anyone have any final thoughts before we throw in maybe just a couple audience questions? Okay, in that case, I think I'll just throw in one question that I've seen. So this term localization and localizing is thrown around a lot. And I saw that someone in the chat asked, what is really meant by localization? So I'd love to know from the panelists what your thoughts are on the terminology around localization, around local actors. Do you think that this language is appropriate, or are there other terms that would better support this discussion about transferring power? Does anyone have any thoughts?
Hello, thank you, Pilar, and everyone. I don't have any problem with the terminology. The way I understand it is, as we have been discussing, looking at both national and civil society organizations working at the local level. So when I talked about the decentralization structure that we are implementing, to me, that's part of localization. In the emergency response, I talked about the district, the village committee, the area committees, and also working with the community-based organizations and organizations working direct with the communities. And Miriam talked about conditionalities. I think it's something that it's not new. We are implementing the Spotlight Initiative in Malawi, and it's highly encouraged that a percentage of the funding goes to the local, to the community organizations. So to me, that's localization. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, yeah, in addition to what my colleague have said, I think when we say localization, many people take it as if it's just for the local actors. For me, I will define localization is the fact of becoming local or becoming located in a particular country or a particular context. Is more than the local NGO, local actors themselves, but how our programs are being located the same, because from our understanding, a program or a system that will work in UK will not really work in Nigeria, or it may not work in even other Western countries. So localization I come across very interesting definition. I think is about is more of the fact of becoming located in a particular context or in a particular place. And when it comes to why local actors need to lead the localization process, you have mentioned it before. In most of the coordination group or in most of the activities, we constitute more than 70% of the participants. And that is why you see most local NGOs are saying, okay, localization, but without more voicing of the international. And another point why localization is mostly seen as local is like local actors, we are always the first responders and continue to operate even when international organizations withdraw in a particular context. So for me, it's the art of locating programs in a particular country or a context. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both for sharing your thoughts around this terminology and how to define it. I know it's something that I myself has struggled with even conducting these case studies. So I'd just like to close with one final question from the audience, and maybe we can just have one short response. So what do people think of the term reclaim our power? We believe that the word shift keeps the agency in the hands of the INGOs to define and give the power. But in fact, we believe that CSOs have power already. It is just a question of claiming it for the communities where it should be. So this is another question around terminology. Would any of you like to give kind of a brief response?
I think your question is about reclaiming power, right? Sorry, can you paraphrase the question again? Sorry.
Yes. It's about the difference or kind of the significance of using the word claim rather than shift. This webinar is called Shifting Power. So it's about how maybe that perpetuates or like insinuates that INGOs are the ones that define and give power. So what do we think of the term claim instead?
Yeah, I think from my own perspective, it's like shipping power is more of like rather than claiming. Claiming is like collecting what you don't even have. So it's just like, how do we come together, work together as a team to ensure that, yeah, at some point the power is being shifted to the local communities, of which the power that we want to claim, I think, is already we already have it in our own hand, because the community accepted us. We are together, whether the INGOs or the material committee are there or not. We are already here. We have the power already. But rather, how do we work together to just learn from you and then ensure that that knowledge you have, it is being shifted for us. Thank you, and over to you, Pilar.
Thank you, Yusuf, for those words and for that kind of insight that you have the power to begin with. Martin, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, just to agree with Yusuf, I think the key word is partnership. So we work in partnership. So whatever terminology we use, I think the key thing to keep in mind is that we are partners in development. So as Yusuf is saying, maybe claiming removes that aspects of partnership. So Yeah, shifting seems better than claiming. Thank you, Over.
Thank you, Martin. I think language is really important when we're talking about these things, and I feel that the language is constantly shifting, but I think it's important that we clarify what we mean. I think, so with that, we'll close the discussion. Thank you so much to our panelists for sharing their wealth of experiences and for engaging critically in that rich conversation. And thank you for our attendees, for joining and for sending in their questions. This discussion really highlighted some of the greatest challenges in shifting power and creating partnerships in child protection. To summarize, I think some of the key take-home messages brought up during the discussion. I think first, that there's a shift really warranted in how we think about funding, what we fund, how we fund, and what kind of conditions we put, because as we've learned from the discussion, it's often exclusionary in terms of meeting standards for due diligence. And it's critically important that funding that will ensure the sustainability, and not only the sustainability, but the growth of national organizations. I think secondly, we've heard a lot about the importance of equitable partnership, this word partnership, between national organizations and the international community. So we know that national organizations should not be only invited to the decision-making table, but should feel kind of empowered to share, as Miriam mentioned, some of these conditions put in place that would ensure that national organizations can contribute meaningfully, and that they should be sought out for their practical expertise in child protection. So we hope that this discussion really prompted some reflection on some best practices for centering national and civil society organizations and engaging communities as partners in child protection. Just as some final reminders, attendees can access the 3 case studies on the CPC website, as well as through the links that will be sent in the chat. Presentation slides and a recording of the webinar with subtitles translated in Spanish, French, and Arabic will also be made available on the CPC website and on the CPHA Community of Practice. And with that, I'll close. Thank you all so much for joining, and we hope this webinar feeds into ongoing conversations about around the reality of shifting power. Thank you.